Hello, photography students. Let's talk today a little bit about social documentary and photojournalism, the genres of photography. In each of my photo classes, I have projects. Usually it's a couple-week project on either social documentary or photojournalism. These two go hand in hand, and the evolution of how they started and where they are today, I'm going to talk a little bit about in your projects. So documentary photography, just in general, the style is the artist is the observer and the camera is recording facts. But of course we know that as an artist you always have your own spin on things, is one way to put it, or your own agenda, or your own way of telling a story. So a documentary photographer or a photojournalist is a storyteller with a camera, with images instead of words. So your task will be to create, tell me a story through photographs. Let's look quickly, hopefully quickly, because I can talk a lot about this stuff. I'm in my Photo 2 course, and I want to look at the social documentary reading, which gives us a great history background. So it's in semester 2. I'm in history, social documentary, and I want to look at some of the beginnings and origins. Now, in the beginning of photography, photographers started out more as scientists and inventors in the early 1800s. By mid-1800s, it had become a career for a few, a select few. But as the decade wore on, or I'm sorry, the century wore on, by the end of the 1800s, photography actually became accessible to more and more people, just common people like it is today. Now it's crazy, everybody has a camera. But back at this time, only a select few, and then it became more and more people had a camera to use. So the role of the photographer started to shift. Looking at some of these examples here of early documentary photography. Photographers began to kind of shift off into a couple of camps. The artist with the camera, which was more of, blanking on his name, hang on, oh my gosh, Alfred Stieglitz. I couldn't remember. Alfred Stieglitz in his gallery 291 in New York City, early 1900s, was an early advocate of photography as an art form and very protective of that. The other direction photography was going in was photojournalism, or a journalist with a camera. And so we kind of have that divide, but they're very similar. These two, social documentary and artists, documentary photography as art and documentary photography as journalism, are one and the same, really. They're just two different applications. Okay, so early documentary photography, that's what I was just talking about. I'm going to kind of run through it all. One of the first applications in photojournalism would have been documenting the Civil War. Matthew Brady and his team of photographers that documented the Civil War. At the time, there were really no ways to get a glimpse of what war was like. This is one of the I think the second war, but one of the very first wars that was ever documented with photographs to really give the grim, brutal reality of what the battlefield looked like, and to erase any sort of grand notions of what it would be like for people that had never seen it up close. So Civil War would be the beginning, and we moved into a different type of modern documentary photography with an agenda. So there were a couple of well-known photographers at this time, Jacob Riis and Louis Hine, that were advocates of social reform, and they worked for agencies that were advocating social reform, and this is where the phrase "a picture is worth 1,000 words" really comes in. Their photographs of the Lower East Side, in Jacob Riis's case, was documenting the ghetto of New York City and what conditions were like for the immigrants living at that time. And Louis Hine is best known for his champion of the working class, and especially children, and his work against child labor and getting child labor laws into place. So they're photographs of the reality of the conditions. Most people just didn't ever see it or bother to see it, or just weren't really that concerned. But when you're faced with a photograph, they really couldn't look away. So here's some of their early work, late 1800s. Lewis Hind's work is from the early 1900s. This is some of the conditions in the ghettos, late 1800s, by Jacob Riis. Here's a Lewis Hind photograph. Steelworkers. Now his work had a lot to do with getting labor laws in place, unions, getting places unionized, and especially the child labor laws. Okay, so Lewis Hind, I would imagine you're going to see a lot of his photographs in your U.S. history books when we talk about child labor laws. So the next grand movement in social documentary was the FSA project, which was part of the WPA, which were hired to document the migration of migrant workers, field workers, farm workers from the Midwest during the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, and most out west to California's Central Valley. It was a lot of workers ended up all over the country, but that was the main focus. So the photographers of the FSA, Farm Securities Administration, had a job to go out and document and take pictures of life during the Great Depression. That's a simple way to put it. And their work was they were hired as photojournalists, but I would argue, and I think most people would agree, that these were works of art. Their work is beautiful. And the most famous photograph from this series from the FSA would be Dorothea Lange's Migrant Mother, which I know we've discussed before in our history unit, and I'm sure you've seen in your history books. And here's some great photographs that really document life during the Great Depression. Well, this is back to Jacob Riis. Walker Evans, well-known FSA photographer. And it really gives us some valuable records of life during these times in our country's history. Right? Lewis Hind, there he is again with his work. So this is an excellent article for my Photo 2 class, but I wanted to share it with all of you. Really great research into what life was like. All right, so how does that apply to you now, and how has documentary photography, social documentary photography evolved? I'm going to move into my AP class real quick because we're going to shift into more contemporary documentary photography. If you're in my AP class in our second semester while you're working on concentration, you're going to do a 2-week study on documentary style photography. I'm going to pull up one of these here. In all my courses, I have a lot of artists that I really want you to look at. I really like this subject, obviously. So right away you're going to notice I have all of this for you to look at, all of these artists I really want you to watch. Please do it. Take the time to do it in weeks 8 and 9 in my AP class. Please pull up a lot of great information. So just look through all of these different artists. Let's just look at a couple really quick. A more modern approach, I really like this one, is called Unbroken Detroit. And this is a recent series by a photographer that is documenting, oh, it's really loading slowly, I hope it pulls up, life in Detroit, which is almost like a ghost town. I have not been there myself, but from what I've heard, the economic depression in the last decade has really hit Detroit hard, and there's a lot of abandoned homes and neighborhoods that have just been basically left abandoned, left as is, empty homes. So let's see some of these photographs from Detroit. Here we go. By the artist or the photographer Dave Giordano. These are beautiful pieces. So this is a social documentary. It's also photojournalism. He's telling us and showing us, for those of us that are not there, what it looks like, and showing us the people and the culture of the place, which is an important aspect to it. So in your series, when you take the photographs, you're going to tell me a story. First, you got to think about what is the story you want to tell. It's a haunting photo. That one's really powerful. What's the story you want to tell me? And then how are you going to tell me? And at the end, I have some tips for you on how you will make sure that you hit everything. So this is a great series you look at. And I have some videos on a lot of the FSA workers. And we can go back to, here's the migrant mother photo, and I have a video on this one for you to watch. Finding Vivian Maier. I have a teaser or short from this film about her. This is a documentary photographer who lived in Chicago, and her work was not discovered until after her death, and she just had this amazing archive of photographs that she had taken, street photography. So she was just taking pictures as she walked around, someone that was recording her life. Let's see, Ouija. That's a really interesting one. Ouija could be known as an early paparazzi. So stretching the definition of photojournalism maybe a little. But his work would be 30s and 40s in New York City, mostly known as kind of tabloid photographer, early tabloid photographer. Would just take pictures of crimes and listen to the police scanner and race to the scene and get pictures of whatever was happening. And a lot of times he got some really interesting shots of the crowds, some of his famous work, or the suspects, the disasters. Really interesting stuff. Some of his photos were just nightlife, so that just people out at night when he was just out waiting. And this one is a shot of the crowd watching the scene, so an interesting view. So Ouija's an interesting character. Look into him. So for your documentary project in my AP class, you're going to produce for me 3 social documentary photos. Tell me a story. Think about what that story is, and look at the masters. Look at all those examples that I provided for you, because they really do inspire. All right, look, in photography 1, I have a photojournalism unit for you, and it's located under careers unit. So for photojournalism, you have 2 weeks to complete this. I like to give you a lot of time because there's a lot of work involved, a lot of footwork, literally, if you're going to be a street photographer. I'm going to try to pull this up correctly. There we go. Here's a great example. This is the Vegas Strip. I want you to make sure that you read through all of the information, all of the artists that I have for you, your discussion board, and your video on Dorothea Lange again, and discuss photojournalism as a career and as an art form. Carl Pope Jr., interesting series done from 1982 in Carbondale, Illinois, outside of Chicago. And I know that's really hard to read, but he has some great images just capturing his community that he lived in. I guess this is over 30 years ago. So take a look at his work. It's a really interesting series. I love these pictures and how they turned out like this. He was using a little toy camera, which is a little plastic camera, which has a lot of light leaks if you use those now even, which gives this effect where you're kind of looking at these photos that they almost look damaged with all this black, that's light leaks coming through. But they're beautiful, I think, in the result. So your project on discussion on girl culture, this is an excellent series in modern social documentary photography. The photographer Lauren Greenfield has done series and films, and this one is a great one. So take a look at this. You need to click on her website to see the whole series, and then I want you to discuss. This is a great discussion for you guys to get into this photograph and what kind of reaction we all have to this photograph. So that's a great social documentary example. Okay, other ones that I haven't even gotten into, just there's so much. Robert Frank would be great. Mary Ellen Mark is excellent contemporary social documentary photographer. All right, so I have a lot of stuff for you to look at. Hopefully it inspires you. All right, before I end, I'm going to go back into my photo 2. So I want to end with some tips for your project on how to get this done right. Just some things to think about. Well, I guess not. It's not letting me here. Let's go here. When you get that yellow alert, there's the images are there. I looked at them later or earlier today. But for some reason they don't load. That's just a weird open class glitch. So when you try to click on it, look, now it's working. Just keep trying. I don't know why sometimes it doesn't pull up. All right, so let's look at your project really quick. Some steps on how to do this correctly. Tell a story. Tell me a story. It can be about where you live. It could be about a certain person. It could be about a place. It could be about your school. It could be about your soccer team. It could be about your family. It could be about if you go on a trip. Let's say you're visiting family in Mexico. Maybe you want to tell me a story about that trip or what life is like in that town or city. Do some research. So you need to know a little bit about your subject. If it's your life, that's easy. So you're going to tell me the story through photographs. All right, choose your style. That's when I really want you to look at the masters of photography and think about it. Do you want these all in black and white? Do you want them to all be kind of anonymous like this? Or do you want them to be more portrait style where you really see the person and the emotion in the story? Be prepared. That means have everything on you. You can get permission. This is important. If you're taking pictures out on the street with strangers, you know, just a shot like this, you're okay, because no one's really up close to you. But if you're going to try to get up close and get a portrait shot, ask them. I mean, almost everyone is fine with it, but it kind of breaks that barrier so you don't feel awkward. You can ask them. I know this is a tough one. You might not even want to talk to them or ask them. If you're shy, then maybe this will be your style, where you're kind of more anonymous style. All right, don't rush. You're not in a hurry. Take several shots. If you think you're in a great one, take several, because if you don't have time to sit there and really look at them and really capture the story that you're trying to tell, it'll show in your results. Okay, make sure that you save all your images. Don't delete. I would process them. Some people really believe in the straight photography. I usually process all of mine. I usually manipulate the contrast and the saturation on all my images. I can't help it. I like to see them look the way, I mean, my camera might not have captured it the way I wanted to, or I might be able to tell my story even better with some light editing. Okay? And learn from the best photographers. That's where I come in. I've provided you with more than enough in the 2 or 3 weeks of your project. So many photographers to look at, and here's some more listed here. Okay? Tell me a story. Shoot a series of photos, and you're going to turn in your best. I think in all my classes you're going to turn in your best 3 at least, but shoot several. I'd say 100 at least to get your story down, and then choose your best ones out of that. All right, good luck. I'm really looking forward to this. I love this project.